Before we begin, there's something you need to understand. Some stories stay buried for a reason. The ones you're about to hear tonight weren't meant to be shared publicly. They come from real people, real moments, and real fear. To protect those involved, identities have been kept confidential, and certain details have been altered. What hasn't been changed is the experience itself. If true stories like these keep you watching, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps this channel continue telling stories that are rarely spoken about. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. I'm a paranormal investigator. I know how that sounds. Like I'm some wannabe ghost hunter with a YouTube channel and a Ouija board. But I take this seriously. I have a master's degree in folklore and cultural anthropology. I approach investigations scientifically, with proper equipment and documentation. In 10 years, I've recorded maybe 3 things I can't explain. Everything else has been wind, animals, or people seeking attention. This happened in September 2023, at Oakwood Cemetery outside Savannah, Georgia. My name is Jennifer Caruso, and I was contacted by the Chatham County Historical Society about reported disturbances at Oakwood. Local teens had been posting videos online, claiming to hear voices and see figures among the graves. The Historical Society was worried about trespassing and vandalism. They wanted me to investigate and debunk the claims publicly so kids would stop coming. I arrived on a Thursday evening with my partner, David Chen. We had our standard equipment: EMF meters, digital recorders, infrared cameras, temperature sensors. The cemetery was beautiful in that distinctly Southern Gothic way. Massive oak trees draped with Spanish moss, ornate iron fencing, monuments that looked like miniature churches. The caretaker, an older man named Raymond who'd worked there for 30 years, let us in after hours. He seemed relieved we were there. "Kids keep jumping the fence," he said, locking the gate behind us. "I found candles and mirrors set up by the Ashford Mausoleum last week. Devil worship nonsense. They watch too many horror movies." He gave us a map marking the areas where most of the reported activity occurred: the northwestern corner near the oldest graves, the Ashford Mausoleum, and a section of children's graves near the back. "You folks be careful," Raymond said as he prepared to leave. "I'll be back at 6 a.m. to let you out." "We'll be fine," David said. He'd done this dozens of times. Raymond hesitated at the gate. "You hear anything strange, anything at all, you call me. I'll come back." "What kind of strange?" I asked. "Singing," he said. "Sometimes late at night I hear singing, like children. But there's never anyone here." He left. David and I set up our base station near the main path. Laptop, equipment cases, folding chairs. It was 8:40 p.m. We had nearly 10 hours. The first few hours were routine. We walked the cemetery, taking baseline readings, photographing everything, recording ambient sounds. The EMF meters showed normal background levels. Temperature was consistent, no anomalies. Around 11:30, we split up to cover more ground. David took the eastern section, I took the west. We each had radios, cameras, and recording equipment. I was documenting the children's section when I heard it. Singing, very faint, like it was coming from far away. A child's voice, high and clear, singing something I didn't recognize. Not a melody I knew, just a simple, repetitive tune. I keyed my radio. "David, are you singing?" Static. Then, "No, why?" "I'm hearing something. Children singing. Can you hear it?" A pause. "No, nothing here. Can you get a recording?" I activated my digital recorder and held it up. The singing continued for maybe 20 seconds, then stopped. I played back the recording. Nothing. Just silence and the ambient sounds of the cemetery, wind, distant traffic, but I'd heard it. I was certain. I continued documenting, but I felt uneasy now. The cemetery felt different, heavier, like the air pressure had changed. At 12:15, my radio crackled. "Jen, I've got something. Eastern section, near the Ashford Mausoleum. Can you come here?" I found David standing in front of a large granite mausoleum with bronze doors. He was staring at his EMF meter. "Look at this," he said, showing me the screen. The readings were spiking, 4, 5, 7 milligus, way above baseline. And they were pulsing, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. "Could be electrical interference," I said. "Underground cables. There's no power lines near here." I checked the map. We started recording. I asked standard questions, documenting the readings. That's when both our EMF meters died. Just shut off. And my camera. And David's camera. All at once. "Batteries," David said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We'd charged everything fully before arriving. Everything had been working perfectly 30 seconds ago. I tried my flashlight. Dead. David's too. The only light came from the distant street lamp outside the cemetery gate. Barely enough to see by. "This isn't right," I said. "We need to get back to base. Get backup equipment." We started walking back toward the main path. That's when we heard it. Both of us, clearly, singing. Multiple voices, children's voices, all around us. Not from any particular direction. Just there, filling the air. And the words, God, the words. They were singing about us. About Jennifer and David. About the Watchers. About staying. About joining them forever. We ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. We ran back toward our base station. Between headstones and monuments. The singing following us, getting louder. I could hear individual voices now. A girl, a boy, maybe a dozen children. All singing about us. We reached our equipment. Everything was dead. The laptop, the backup batteries, everything. Dead or missing. The gate, David said. We need to get to the gate. But the gate was locked. Raymond had locked it. We were trapped. The singing stopped. The silence was somehow worse. We stood at the gate, breathing hard, waiting. Nothing moved, no sound. Then David grabbed my arm. Jen, look. Between the headstones, barely visible in the dim light, there were figures. Small figures, children, maybe 15 or 20 of them, standing among the graves. Not moving, just standing, watching us. They didn't look like ghosts or spirits or anything supernatural. They looked like children. Real children, but wrong somehow. The way they stood too still. The way their eyes caught the light wrong. One of them, a little girl in a white dress, started walking toward us. The others followed, slowly, silently. David was trying to climb the fence. It was 10 feet high, iron spikes at the top. He was screaming for help. I was frozen, watching those children come closer. The girl reached the gate. She was maybe 6 years old. She tilted her head and smiled at me. "We like visitors," she said. Her voice was normal, sweet, a child's voice. "Will you stay and play?" I found my voice. "No, we need to leave. We're sorry we disturbed you." "Everyone says that," she said. "But it's okay. We forgive you. We always forgive visitors. That's why we invite them to stay." The other children had formed a circle around us now, too close, cutting off any escape. "We're going to call the caretaker," David said from the fence. "He'll let us out." "Mr. Raymond?" The girl laughed. "He doesn't hear us anymore. He stopped listening years ago. That's why he's still alive." My blood went cold. "What do you want?" "Just to play," she said. "Just to have friends. It's lonely here. So lonely." She reached out toward me. I stumbled backward, tripped over David's equipment bag, went down hard. My hand touched something, a flashlight, one we hadn't unpacked. I pressed the button. It worked. The beam swept across the children. They flinched back, raising their hands. In that split second of light, I saw them clearly. Not children. Not anymore. Just things wearing the shape of children. Faces wrong. Mouths too wide. Eyes too dark. "Run!" I screamed. David dropped from the fence and we ran, using the flashlight to cut through the cemetery. The children followed. I could hear them behind us. Not running. Walking. Always just walking, but somehow always close. We reached the back fence, the one bordering the woods. It was only 6 feet high. We climbed it, tearing our clothes on the barbed wire at the top, and crashed through the undergrowth. We didn't stop running until we reached a gas station on the highway. We called Raymond from there. He came immediately, found our equipment scattered throughout the cemetery. Everything was destroyed, smashed, torn apart, buried in the dirt. We never went back. The Historical Society terminated our contract. Said we'd been unprofessional, that we'd vandalized our own equipment for attention. But I know what I saw, what we both saw. I still have the recording from my backup recorder, the one I'd left in my car, the one that captured everything from midnight until we escaped. I've only listened to it once. You can hear us talking. You can hear the EMF readings. You can hear us running, and you can hear the children singing, clear as day. Singing about Jennifer and David, singing about the new friends, who came to visit but refused to stay, singing about patience, about waiting, about how visitors always come back eventually. I haven't done an investigation since. David moved to California and won't return my calls. I deleted my website and told the historical societies I worked with that I was retiring, but sometimes late at night I hear singing, children's voices. And I know they're still waiting at Oakwood Cemetery, waiting for Jennifer to come back and play. If the first story stayed with you, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let me know how it made you feel. And if there's anything you think could be improved, your suggestions are always welcome. And don't go anywhere because the next stories are even more disturbing. I'm a freelance photographer, mostly weddings and corporate events, but my real passion has always been historical documentation. In October 2023, I was working on a personal project, photographing old cemeteries across rural Pennsylvania. There's something about these places that draws me in. The craftsmanship of century-old headstones, the way nature reclaims forgotten graves, the stories carved into weathered marble. Hillcrest Cemetery wasn't on any tourist map. I found it mentioned in a local historical society forum, an abandoned burial ground dating back to the 1840s, about 40 minutes outside Harrisburg. The forum post was from 2019, and only 3 people had commented. One said the access road was overgrown. Another mentioned the cemetery had been decommissioned in the 1960s when the church that owned it burned down. The third comment just said, "Don't go alone." I didn't think much of it. I'd been to dozens of abandoned cemeteries. They're peaceful, really. Sad sometimes, when you see children's graves or families buried together, but peaceful. I drove out on a Thursday afternoon in late October. The sky was that particular shade of gray that comes before sunset in autumn, everything washed out and colorless. My GPS lost signal about 2 miles from the location, but I'd downloaded offline maps. The access road was exactly as described, more of a dirt path. Really, branches scraping both sides of my car. The cemetery appeared suddenly as the trees opened up. It was larger than I expected, maybe 2 acres, surrounded by a rusted iron fence that had collapsed in several places. Most of the headstones were still standing, tilted at various angles like crooked teeth. Some were broken. Many were covered in moss and lichen. Wild roses had grown over everything, their thorny vines threading between the graves. I parked at the gate and checked my phone. 4:47 p.m. I had maybe an hour of good light left. I grabbed my camera bag and pushed through the partially open gate. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds, no insects, just the faint whisper of wind through dead grass. I've been in quiet places before, but this was different. It felt like the silence had weight to it, pressing against my eardrums. I started photographing. The headstones were beautiful in their decay, Victorian era, marble with intricate carvings, iron crosses, even a few small mausoleums with their doors rusted shut. I was working my way down a row of graves when I noticed something odd. Fresh flowers. A small bouquet of white lilies on a grave marked Sarah Whitmore, 1847-1851. I stopped. The flowers couldn't have been more than a day or 2 old. Someone had been here recently. I felt a small twist of unease. I wasn't alone out here after all, or at least, I hadn't been recently. I kept shooting, but I was more aware of my surroundings now. The light was fading faster than I'd expected. The gray sky was darkening to charcoal. I checked my phone again. 5:23 p.m. I'd been here for over half an hour, though it felt like maybe 10 minutes. That's when I heard it. A scraping sound, like metal on stone. It came from somewhere deeper in the cemetery, past a cluster of larger monuments. I lowered my camera and listened. Nothing, just wind. I told myself it was probably an animal, a raccoon or possum moving around, but I hadn't seen any signs of wildlife. No droppings, no disturbed earth around the graves. Nothing. I decided to head back to the car. I'd gotten enough photos anyway, and the light was almost gone. But as I turned around, I realized I wasn't sure which direction I'd come from. The rows of headstones all looked the same in the dimming light, and I'd been weaving between them randomly while shooting. I felt a flutter of panic. I'm generally good with directions, but the cemetery was larger than I'd thought, and everything looked different now. I picked a direction and started walking, trying to stay calm. I'd hit the fence eventually, and I could follow it back to the gate. The scraping sound came again. Closer this time. Definitely metal on stone, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone dragging a chain across granite. "Hello?" My voice sounded small and stupid. "Is someone there?" No answer. The scraping stopped. I walked faster, my camera bag banging against my hip. The light was nearly gone now, just a dim gray wash that made everything look flat and depthless. I couldn't see the fence. I couldn't see my car. I couldn't see anything but headstones and shadows. Then I saw the mausoleum. I'd photographed it earlier. A small stone structure with a peaked roof and a rusted iron door. But now the door was open. I was certain it had been closed before, rusted shut when I'd tried the handle. I stopped walking. Something was very wrong. I could feel it now, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. I needed to leave, immediately. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight. No signal, as expected, but I had 43% battery. The light was weak, but better than nothing. I swept it across the cemetery, looking for the fence, the gate, anything familiar. The beam caught something moving, just for a second, between 2 headstones about 20 feet away. A figure, pale, hunched, moving with a strange jerking gait. I froze. My heart was slamming against my ribs. The figure moved behind a monument and disappeared. I hadn't gotten a good look at it. Couldn't tell if it was a person or an animal, or just a trick of the shadows and my panicked imagination. "Hello?" I called again. My voice cracked. "I'm just leaving. I didn't mean to disturb anything." Movement again, to my left. Closer now. I spun, raising my phone light. Nothing. Just headstones and that impossible silence. I ran. I didn't care about direction anymore. I just ran, dodging around graves, my camera bag swinging wildly. My foot caught on something, a sunken grave marker or a root, and I went down hard, my phone flying from my hand. I heard it hit stone with a crack. Darkness, complete and total. I couldn't see anything. I was on my hands and knees on ground that was soft and cold and smelled like old earth. I groped around frantically for my phone, my fingers brushing against grass and cold stone. I heard breathing. Not my own, someone else. Close enough that I could hear the wet, rattling quality of it. Close enough that I could smell something rotten and sweet, like flowers left too long in stale water. I found my phone. The screen was shattered, but the light still worked. I raised it. A face, inches from mine. Pale, dirt-streaked, with eyes that didn't blink, and a mouth that hung open in a slack, dark circle. It wasn't moving. It was just there, staring. I screamed and scrambled backward. My hand touched something, the iron fence. I didn't know how I'd gotten there, but I didn't care. I ran along it, following it, branches tearing at my clothes. I saw the gate, pushed through it, ran to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something following me, but there was nothing. Just darkness. I drove back to Harrisburg doing 70 on those dirt roads, not caring if I wrecked my car. When I got to my hotel, I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, shaking, before I could go inside. The next morning, I told myself it had been a panic attack. Shadows and stress in my imagination. I'd been working too hard, not sleeping enough. The cemetery had been creepy and I'd psyched myself out. Rational explanations. But when I downloaded my photos, I found something in the last picture I'd taken before the sun went down. It was a shot of the open mausoleum door. And in the darkness inside, barely visible, was a figure standing there, watching, waiting for someone stupid enough to photograph the dead. I deleted all the photos. I haven't photographed a cemetery since. My name is Marcus Webb, and until last spring, I worked as a maintenance supervisor for the city of Ashland, Oregon. Part of my job involved checking on city-owned properties, including several small parks and 2 old cemeteries that the city had absorbed when they annexed land back in the 80s. Riverside Cemetery was one of them. It dated back to 1889, a small plot of maybe half an acre on a hill overlooking what used to be the Rogue River Valley before they built the highway. Most of the families with relatives buried there had moved away decades ago. The city kept it mowed and the trees trimmed, but nobody visited anymore. We'd get maybe 2 or 3 people a year coming by to look at genealogy records. In March 2024, I got a call from the city manager's office. Someone had reported vandalism at Riverside, broken headstones, graffiti on the fence. I needed to go assess the damage and file a report for the police. I drove out there on a Tuesday morning. It was raining, that constant gray drizzle we get in Oregon that makes everything look like an old photograph. The cemetery gate was open, which was odd because I'd locked it myself the last time I'd been there, maybe 3 weeks before. The damage wasn't as bad as I'd expected. A few headstones had been knocked over, and someone had spray-painted a pentagram on the gate. Kids, probably, looking for a spooky place to drink beer and feel edgy. I'd seen it before. I took photos for the report and started checking to make sure nothing else was damaged. That's when I noticed the groundskeeper's shed door was open. We didn't use that shed anymore. It was older than the cemetery itself, built sometime in the 1920s. We kept our equipment in a newer building, near the front gate. The old shed was just there, empty, scheduled for demolition that summer. I walked over to close it. The door was heavy, old wood with iron hardware. Inside was empty, except for some shelves and the smell of mildew. But on the floor, in the center of the shed, was a key. An old skeleton key, brass ornate. I picked it up. It was heavy, cold, and there was an inscription on the bow, Eternal Rest. I'd never seen it before. I checked all the locks in the cemetery. The gate, the mausoleum, the utility panel. The key didn't fit anything. I should have left it there. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I thought it was historical, worth keeping. Maybe I was curious. I put it in my pocket and finished my inspection. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in Riverside Cemetery, but it looked different, maintained, fresh flowers on the graves. And there was a man in old-fashioned clothes, black suit, bowler hat, watching me from beside a large monument. He didn't say anything, just watched. When I woke up, the key was on my nightstand. I'd put it in my jacket pocket, and my jacket was hanging in the hall closet. I stared at it for a long time before getting ready for work. Over the next few days, things got strange. I'd hear footsteps in my apartment when I was alone. Always the same pattern, slow, measured, like someone pacing. I'd check and find nothing. Doors I'd left open would be closed. My keys would be in different places than where I'd left them. And every night, the same dream. The cemetery. The man in the black suit, watching. On Friday, I decided to return the key. I'd put it back in the shed and forget about it. But when I got to the cemetery, the shed was gone. Not torn down, just gone. There was nothing but bare ground where it had stood, as if it had never existed. I asked the other maintenance guys about it. They looked at me like I was crazy. There had never been a groundskeeper's shed at Riverside, they said. I was thinking of Hillside Cemetery on the other side of town. But I knew what I'd seen. I had photos on my phone from Tuesday. Except when I checked, the photos showed the cemetery, the vandalism, but no shed. Just empty ground. That weekend, the footsteps in my apartment got worse. Now they were coming from inside my bedroom while I was in the living room. I'd rush in and find nothing, but the key would have moved. From my dresser to my desk. From my desk to the windowsill. Sunday night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I didn't look at my clock. I just knew the time. Felt it. The man from my dreams was standing at the foot of my bed. Not translucent or glowing or any of that movie ghost bullshit. He was just there, solid, wearing his black suit and bowler hat. His face was gray and waxy, like something preserved. He held out his hand. Palm up, waiting. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. I could barely breathe. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then he spoke, his voice like wind through dead grass. You took my key. My hand moved on its own. I reached for my nightstand, picked up the key, and held it out. He took it, his fingers cold and dry as paper. Then he was gone, just gone. The air where he'd stood smelled like rain and old earth. I called in sick Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday, I went to the city archives and looked up Riverside Cemetery. It took me 2 hours, but I found it. A news article from 1923. Groundskeeper found dead at Riverside Cemetery. Edmund Waverly, 54, discovered in equipment shed. Death ruled a heart attack. There was a photo. Edmund Waverly wore a black suit and bowler hat. I quit my job the next week. Told them it was for personal reasons. I moved to Portland 2 months later. I've driven past Riverside Cemetery once since then, just to see. The groundskeeper's shed is there now. Door closed, locked. I don't have nightmares anymore. But sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I hear those footsteps, slow, measured, pacing. And I know Edmund Waverly is still looking for intruders in his cemetery, still protecting the dead from people like me who take things that don't belong to them. My grandmother died in August 2024, and I inherited her obsession with family history. She'd spent 40 years researching our genealogy, tracing our lineage back to Scotland. In the 1600s, among her papers, I found an unfinished project locating the grave of our earliest American ancestor, Thomas Briarwood, who died in 1784. My name is Hannah Price. I'm a high school history teacher in Burlington, Vermont. I had the time and the interest, so I decided to complete what my grandmother had started. Her notes led me to a place called Briarwood Cemetery in rural New Hampshire, about 2 hours from Burlington. It wasn't a family cemetery, just a coincidence of names apparently. But her research suggested Thomas might have been buried there before the land was sold and the cemetery renamed. I drove out on a Saturday in early November. The cemetery was located down a dirt road that barely appeared on GPS, surrounded by dense forest. The entrance was marked by 2 stone pillars. The iron gate between them rusted open and overgrown with vines. The cemetery was smaller than I expected, maybe 50 graves, most from the late 1700s and early 1800s. The headstones were weathered and tilted, many illegible. It took me an hour of searching to find what I was looking for. A broken stone marker that read T. Briarwood, 1704. I felt a genuine thrill. This was my ancestor, proof of a connection stretching back over 2 centuries. I took photos, did a rubbing of the inscription, and wrote down the coordinates. My grandmother would have been so proud. As I was packing up my supplies, I noticed something odd. In the center of the cemetery was a monument I hadn't seen before, a tall obelisk made of dark stone, maybe 15 feet high. It was in much better condition than the other markers, as if it had been maintained. There was an inscription at the base. Here rest those with no names, no kin, no memory. May they find peace in the forgetting. It was a pauper's memorial, I realized. A marker for the unknown dead buried nearby. Sad, but not unusual for the time period. What was unusual was the offering at the base. Fresh flowers, white roses, maybe a day old at most. Someone had been here recently. I checked my watch. 4:30 p.m. I needed to leave soon if I wanted to get home before dark. But I was curious about the other graves now, about who else might be buried here. I started documenting the other headstones, taking photos and notes. That's when I found the pattern. Every grave in the cemetery had death dates between 1760 and 1785, except for one. A small marker near the back, partially hidden by overgrown grass. Elizabeth Marsh, beloved daughter. 1916-1917. This cemetery had been active until 1977? Or had someone been buried here decades after it was abandoned? I took a photo of the headstone. My phone died. Full battery to nothing in an instant. I tried to restart it. Nothing. The light was fading fast. The forest around the cemetery was getting darker, the shadows between the trees deepening. I decided to leave. I could look up Elizabeth Marsh online when I got home, but when I turned toward the entrance, I couldn't find it. The stone pillars should have been visible from anywhere in the cemetery. It was small enough that you could see end to end, but I couldn't see them. I could only see headstones and trees. I walked toward where I thought the entrance should be. Nothing but more graves. Different graves. Markers I hadn't seen before. How was that possible? I documented the entire cemetery. I fought down panic. I was just disoriented. The failing light was confusing me. I picked a direction and walked, figuring I'd hit the fence or the road eventually. 10 minutes later, I was still among headstones, still in the cemetery. I'd passed the same graves multiple times. I recognized them, including the tall obelisk in the center. But the obelisk wasn't in the center anymore. It was off to one side, and the inscription had changed. Here rest those who search but do not find. May they wander always between memory and forgetting. That wasn't what it had said before. I knew what it had said. I'd read it carefully. I heard a sound. Footsteps in dead leaves. Someone was walking through the cemetery. I spun around, flooded with relief. Hello? I'm lost. Can you help me find the entrance? The footsteps stopped. No answer. I waited, listening. Nothing. Then the footsteps started again. Closer. Multiple sets of footsteps now. All around me. But I couldn't see anyone. The cemetery was empty except for me. I ran. I ran toward what I thought was the fence. Crashed through undergrowth. Tripped over a sunken grave. Got up and kept running. The footsteps followed, keeping pace. Never quite catching up, but never falling behind. I found the stone pillars. Finally, the entrance. I ran through them onto the dirt road. My car was there, 20 feet away. I fumbled for my keys, dropped them, grabbed them, got the door open. I didn't look back. I drove out of there doing 50 on that narrow dirt road, not caring if I wrecked. When I got home, it was 9 p.m. I'd been in that cemetery for 4.5 hours, though it had felt like maybe 30 minutes. My phone still wouldn't turn on. I plugged it in to charge and went through the photos on my camera. The rubbings I'd done, the documentation. Everything was there, including the photo of Elizabeth Marsh's headstone. I looked her up. It took me 2 hours of searching, but I found it. A newspaper article from September 1977, from a small New Hampshire town near where the cemetery was located. Local girl still missing. Elizabeth Marsh, 9, has been missing for 3 weeks. Police have no leads. The search continues. Another article from November 1977. Marsh girl presumed dead. After 2 months, police have called off the search for Elizabeth. Marsh, foul play is suspected, but no evidence has been found. She'd never been found. Her body had never been recovered, but she had a grave in that cemetery, with a death date. Someone had buried her there, or buried something there, and marked it. I thought about those footsteps, about the cemetery that changed, about the inscription that warned about those who search. I haven't gone back. I finished my grandmother's genealogy project using the photos I took, but I left out the part about Briarwood Cemetery. I told my family Thomas's grave had been destroyed, records lost. A small lie, because I know what would happen if anyone else went there. Anyone who searched too deeply, who asked too many questions about the forgotten dead. They'd hear footsteps. They'd see the obelisk change its inscription. They'd wander between memory and forgetting. Just like Elizabeth Marsh. Just like all the others whose names aren't on any headstone, who disappeared into that cemetery and never came out. Last week I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a white rose pressed and dried, and a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. Thank you for remembering. My phone still doesn't work. Won't turn on, won't charge, won't do anything. But sometimes late at night I hear it buzz, like someone's calling, like someone's trying to reach me from somewhere I can't answer. Someone from Briarwood Cemetery, where the forgotten wait for visitors who search too deeply into the past. I worked as a night security guard for a property management company in upstate New York. Not glamorous work. I'd do rounds at various properties the company owned, checking for vandalism or trespassing. Most nights were boring. That's what I liked about it. My name is Robert Kimball. In March 2023, the company acquired a new property, Greenwood Cemetery in a small town called Millbrook. The cemetery had been privately owned for over a century before the family that ran it went bankrupt. Our company bought it cheap, planning to clean it up and resell it to the county. My supervisor, Dale, told me to add it to my rounds. Just drive through once a night, make sure nobody was messing around. The cemetery had a problem with teenagers using it as a party spot. The first few weeks were uneventful. I'd drive through around 2 a.m., shine my spotlight around, mark it on my log and move on. I saw beer cans and cigarette butts sometimes, but never any people. The cemetery was old, graves dating back to the 1830s and in rough shape. Weeds everywhere, headstones falling over, trees growing wild and untrimmed. In late March, I started noticing something odd. Fresh dirt on graves. Not all of them, just a few scattered throughout the cemetery. Like someone had been digging, but not like grave robbers. The dirt was piled neatly next to the headstones, as if someone had opened the graves and then carefully filled them back in. I reported it to Dale. He told me to keep an eye out and call the cops if I saw anyone. But I never did. The cemetery was always empty when I showed up. Then I found the tools, a shovel and a pickaxe, left beside one of the disturbed graves, both old wooden handles worn smooth with use. I took photos for my report. When I came back the next night to collect them, they were gone. I started doing my rounds at different times, trying to catch whoever was doing this. 2:30 a.m. one night, 1:15 the next, 3 a.m. after that. But every time I arrived, the cemetery was empty. And every few nights, there'd be another grave with fresh dirt piled beside it. On April 7th, I arrived at 11:30 p.m., earlier than usual. The gate was open. I always left it unlocked for my rounds. But someone else was there. I could see a truck parked inside, headlights off, near the back of the cemetery. Finally, I called the cops first, then drove in slowly with my lights off. As I got closer, I could see someone working near a headstone, digging. An older man, maybe 60s, wearing work clothes. I got out of my car and approached with my flashlight. "Sir, this is private property. I need you to stop what you're doing." He didn't look up, just kept digging. I got closer and shined my light on him. His face was weathered and blank, eyes focused on his work. The grave he was digging at had a headstone marked Samuel Greenwood. 1884. "Sir," I said louder, "put down the shovel." He stopped, looked at me. His expression didn't change. "Got to tend the graves," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Got to tend them all. It's my job. This cemetery is closed. You need to leave." "Can't leave," he said. "Got to tend the graves. Been doing it 60 years. Been doing it 60 years, he repeated. "Can't stop now. They need tending." The police arrived 10 minutes later. By then, the man had gone back to digging, ignoring me completely. The officers approached carefully. One of them recognized him. "Jesus Christ, that's Walter Greenwood," Officer Martinez said. "Walt, what are you doing out here?" The old man looked up, tending the graves, like always. Martinez pulled me aside. "Walter was the cemetery caretaker for 40 years. He retired back in 2005, when the family sold off most of their assets. He's got dementia now. Lives in a care facility in town. His daughter must not have secured his room properly. They took Walter away gently. He didn't resist, just kept muttering about the graves needing tending. I felt bad for him, honestly. Sad more than anything else. But that didn't explain the tools disappearing. Walter couldn't have moved them. He was at the care facility, supervised 24 hours a day according to Martinez. I mentioned it to the officer. He shrugged. "Kids probably took them. Happens all the time." After that night, the digging stopped. No more disturbed graves. I figured maybe Walter had been sneaking out regularly, and now that his daughter had been notified, she'd made sure it couldn't happen again. 2 weeks went by. Normal rounds. Nothing unusual. Then, on April 22nd, I arrived at 1:40 a.m. and found every single grave in the cemetery had been tended. Every single one. The weeds had been pulled. The headstones had been straightened. The dirt had been smoothed and patted down. The cemetery looked better than it had in decades. It would have taken a crew of 10 people working all day to do what had been done. And it had happened in less than 24 hours. I'd been there the night before and everything had been overgrown and neglected. I got out of my car slowly, shining my light around. The cemetery was empty, silent, but the work had been done meticulously, professionally. I called Dale. He didn't believe me until I sent him photos. Then he drove out to see for himself. We walked the entire cemetery together at 3 in the morning, both of us unsettled. Every grave had been tended, every single one. "Maybe the county sent a crew," Dale said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Maybe they started maintenance early." I called the county the next day. They had no record of any work done at Greenwood Cemetery. They hadn't authorized any crews. They didn't even officially own it yet. The paperwork was still being processed. I should have quit then. I should have told Dale to take the cemetery off my route. But I was curious, and honestly, a little scared to show it. I kept doing my rounds. The cemetery stayed maintained, perfectly maintained. Even as spring turned to summer and weeds should have been growing back, Everything stayed neat and trimmed. The grass was always exactly the right length. The flowers that grew wild around some of the headstones were always pruned. The paths were always clear. In June, I started seeing him, Walter. I'd arrive at the cemetery and catch glimpses of someone working, a figure near the back, or between the monuments. But when I'd drive over to check, no one would be there. Just freshly tended graves. I looked into Walter Greenwood's situation. Called the care facility pretending to be a relative. They told me Walter had passed away on April 20th, peacefully in his sleep. April 20th, 2 days before every grave in the cemetery had been perfectly maintained. I stopped doing rounds after midnight, started coming at dusk instead, right before my shift, when there was still some light. I couldn't face being there in the dark anymore, knowing what I knew. But the cemetery didn't like the change in schedule. The night I skipped it entirely, told Dale. I'd done the round but stayed home instead. I had a dream. Walter Greenwood was standing at the foot of my bed, still in his work clothes, holding his shovel. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with those blank eyes. When I woke up, there was dirt on my bedroom floor. Fresh dirt, smelling like earth and rain, a trail of it leading from my bed to the door. I went back to doing my rounds, every night, 1:30 a.m. like clockwork. I'd drive through, shine my spotlight around, mark it in my log. And every night the cemetery was perfectly maintained. And every night I'd see him, just for a second. Walter Greenwood tending his graves. In August, the company sold the property to the county. They hired a new maintenance crew to take over upkeep. Professional landscapers, full team, all the proper equipment. The crew quit after 3 days. I heard about it from Dale. They said someone was interfering with their work. They'd mow a section, turn around, and it would already be done. Better than they'd done it. They'd trim hedges and come back to find them perfectly shaped. They found tools moved, equipment rearranged, and once, the entire crew saw an old man working near the back of the cemetery. When they approached him, he vanished. The county tried 2 more crews. Both quit within a week. Now they leave Greenwood Cemetery alone. They post a sign saying it's maintained by a private caretaker and leave it at that. Because it is maintained. Perfectly. Every day. I quit the security company in September. Couldn't do it anymore. The dreams got worse. Walter showing up more frequently, always just watching, always holding that shovel. And the dirt. I'd find it everywhere. In my car, my apartment, my locker at work. Fresh cemetery dirt, showing up in places it had no right to be. My last night on the job, I drove through Greenwood Cemetery one final time. I sat there at the gate for a long time, working up the courage to go in. When I finally did, I drove slowly through, taking my time, saying goodbye in a weird way. Walter was there, standing next to a fresh grave near the center of the cemetery. A grave that hadn't been there the week before. The headstone read Robert Kimball with my birth year. But no death date, not yet. He looked at me and nodded, just once. A simple acknowledgement. I drove out of there and never went back. That was over a year ago now. I work retail now, day shifts. Nothing to do with security or cemeteries or night work. I moved to a different town, changed my phone number, tried to start fresh, but I still find dirt sometimes. In my shoes, in my pockets. Once, in my mailbox, an envelope full of cemetery dirt with no note, no return address. And I have the dreams. Walter, standing in Greenwood Cemetery, tending the graves. All the graves, including the one with my name on it. He's patient. He's been tending those graves for 60 years, alive and dead. He can wait. He knows I'll come back eventually. Everyone buried in Greenwood Cemetery comes back eventually. That's what the caretaker is for. That's what he does. He tends the graves and waits for the people whose names are carved in stone. Last week I got sick. Nothing major, just a bad flu. But lying in bed, feverish, I had the dream again. Walter standing over my grave, the one with my name. This time he was filling it in, patting down the dirt carefully, tending it properly. And I knew, somehow I knew, when my time comes, wherever I die, whatever happens, I'll end up there, in Greenwood Cemetery, with Walter watching over me. Because once the caretaker knows your name, once he's carved it on a stone and tended your plot, you belong to that cemetery. You belong to him. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know. If something happens to me, if I disappear or die under strange circumstances, check Greenwood Cemetery in Millbrook, New York. Look for a grave with my name on it. It'll be perfectly maintained. Weeds pulled, dirt smoothed, flowers growing. Walter Greenwood takes care of his own, and I'm his now, whether I like it or not.